everyone, welcome to today's Beyond Mainstream podcast. As some of you may have noticed, we've had a number of guests that I've invited onto the show that I've wanted to do for a long time, but my stable partner in crime is Shulagh Jacobs. And today is a really special podcast. I think you're going to find it very interesting. Shulagh has recently written an article. It's still in kind of pre-release status, I would say. I got the privilege of reading it yesterday and this morning. It's called How They Made Us Hate Each Other. I just want to welcome Shulagh to the show. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good to see you too.
So why did you decide? I know you've been writing for quite a while, and you've been writing some fantastic single issue, probably single subject type blogs and articles, which have been really well written. And one of the things I like about your writing, it's very clean, and it just seems like didn't Churchill say, sorry for the length of my letter, I didn't have the time to make it shorter. Being able to write consistent, coherently, bringing clarity and simplicity without dumbing down a subject, I think it takes a real skill and a lot of effort. And I just want to acknowledge that up front. So everyone watching knows where I stand on the subject. So tell us a bit about the article. Why did you write it? And then maybe we can go through it and get into a bit more detail.
Well, I guess one of the things that really made me kind of sit up and look, and I found quite shocking last year, was the way people turned on each other. And when lockdown first started, some of the arguments that I was seeing on Facebook and, friends who, were really close were openly disagreeing, and like relationships were breaking down all over the place, even between sort of family members and loved ones. And not only did I think that was sad, and that it was also one of the reasons that I realised there was something way more sinister going on. And obviously, a lot of things came to light around that time. There was the SAGE documents, the kind of now infamous SPI-B document about how they were quite prepared to use coercion. That document was quite brazen about kind of raising the fear levels and putting pressure on the public if necessary. And so that was kind of out in the open. But I started to wonder a little bit more deeply where some of these ideas came from. How can we be absolutely sure that this is manipulation? Can I
pause you for a sec? Yeah, because I just want to so let's take that first point of view where people are starting to turn each other, being very what's the word? What is it when you put up with somebody, or you allow them to have certain views? There's a word for
tolerance.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, tolerate. So we've gone from people always, there's many instances in life where we have different views, and we tolerate that and we engage in that. But what I think has happened over this era since March 2020 is those tolerances have been strained, and we knew something was off. For the most part, I'd say most people just kind of go, oh, they're wrong, they're idiots. And there's this kind of invalidation, dismissal, and then there's an ad hominem attacks of, oh, you're just a normie and a sheep, and you're a conspiracy tinfoil hat, right wing, blah, 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 blah. And then it just becomes very polarized. And you're right, within families, within marriages, within friends. I've got friends of 20 plus years that I found it very difficult to engage with them after a certain point. It's not taking this. I'll say a bit more about how I'm making progress with that. But what you're now alluding to is that maybe all this isn't just happening because a novel virus turned up and the government has had to do what it had to do to protect the population, and yet there's other kind of more orchestrated agendas going on. And orchestrated agendas mean, in my opinion, it would mean funding, would mean strategies, would mean planning, would mean briefing, debriefing to a certain outcome. So what you're saying is that you notice that these disparages between individuals and families and different people and friends was going on. But at some point you thought, hold on, is there more going on here than maybe a natural state of affairs?
Yeah, it was clear that it was no longer possible to just agree to disagree over certain things. And having done kind of the sort of scratching of the surface of the Behavioural Insights team, who, you know, we all kind of know exist, but I think few people realise exactly who they are, what they do, and how ubiquitous these behavioural scientists actually are.
Are they also known as nudge?
Yeah. So nudge theory came about in the early 2000s, and there was a particular book that was written by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. And this Cass Sunstein was a Harvard professor, a legal scholar, and he was known by the media guy in America, Glenn Beck. He labelled him the most dangerous man in America due to kind of the extremeness of some of his views. And so this book became one of the kind of fundamental and most famous texts about the whole idea of nudge, and it was soon after adopted into governments because Sunstein was in the Obama administration. So I think Obama was very excited to take up this concept, and then Cameron in the UK adopted it as well. And that was when our actual Behavioural Insights team was set up.
But in uncertain teams, these are manipulations, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure.
These are about manipulating, directing, controlling, and I think now we're maybe at a level of coercion to enforce an outcome of behaviour, i.e., buy this, vote for that, or get the vaccine and put your face mask on, all the things that we're going to, I suppose, go into. So these are high-level psychological. I mean, I think you've got here as NLP techniques, all sorts of NLP's neuro-linguistic programming, but these are, by any other name, stealth tactics to orchestrate an outcome.
Yeah, I mean, they can be used for good, for sure, but they can also be used for malicious purposes as well. And so that was kind of what I wanted to sort out in my own head, you know, which are the malicious bits and who and where was orchestrating them, and, you know, who's been kind of seeding these ideas throughout the media, and how's that actually been done.
So that kind of that short history of nudge is where you kind of start the article.
Yeah, we go on to look at the UCL, University College London, Susan Michie and her operation there. And she's quite an interesting character.
Yeah, I think it's really important that names are named, because quite often when you talk about these things, people are like, well, you know, quite often you've heard it over the years, is who are they? You know, like as in probably the top of the echelons of control and the elites. But there are many, many millions of people, or hundreds of thousands of people that are influential lower down. We could call them actors, or useful idiots is another term, or orchestrators of the plan, the order followers. So they're within these organizations, where they're in scientific organizations, banking institutions, the legal, the education, wherever they are carrying out and orchestrating the plans of the agendas that are there.
Yeah, I mean, she is a very influential lady, because she's also involved in behavioural insights at the World Health Organization. I think I sent you a link. She was recently awarded a prize in Turkey for the work she'd done during the pandemic there. And obviously people like her are training the new generation of behavioural psychologists as well. You know, they're writing the textbooks, they're doing the blogs, the podcasts, and doing interviews all over the place.
It's almost like they are evolving the matrix. That's what I see. It's like they got, you know, matrix 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.3, and it's this evolving. And what I find is very interesting, quite interesting, but actually quite terrifying. When we look at a lifetime, when we look at, say, our age and I think also we're our age group, we're pre-digital. So we have a whole experience of the world and life without digital, and we saw it come in, and we've grown with it, and we've learnt with it, and we've found ourselves on the side of history that we are, and we are very far and few between. And this, and we're aware of these orchestrations and influences. Whereas I really worry for our younger generation who have grown up within it. And obviously the youth and children are our future. I'm not confident that they even have the will to push back.
No, and because it's all they've ever known.
All they've ever known, they've been kind of conditioned and at a level of Pavlovian response through the endomorphins and the kicks and the buzzes we get off the tech, whether it's likes or sharing or or how we interact with these devices, is they have been addicted. I mean, I would say I'm addicted, hands up. I wouldn't argue with that. However, my reason for being on there isn't, I would say, to be in it. I'm looking at from a point of view on it. And I'd say there's a lot of people that are looking at it from on it. I mean, I think someone said the other day about, I said, what is Facebook for? And someone said, oh, it's a tool for manipulation and control, blah, blah. And then someone said, yeah, but you're in it. There's a difference between being there and being at the effect of it. And I'm sure we're all affected by it at some level.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there were times, going back to the start of our conversation, there were times last year when I was literally scared to open up Facebook in the mornings because of the amount and the kinds of the comments that my posts were getting. I found that in itself quite traumatizing because I've never been a fan of confrontation. But at the same time,
isn't it an odd kind of confrontation, because it doesn't really it kind of builds and builds and builds. Because if you have a row with someone at the pub or with a friend in person, it kind of comes to a natural end. It's like bang, it's done and it's diffused and you walk away. Whereas I think with the digital build-up, it seems to just build and build and build. And one of the recommendations I get from a lot of other friends who are researchers, you've got to take time away. You've got to go.
Oh, for sure.
You've got to go and let it dissipate, because there is a charge, whether it's fear or concern or worry or anger and frustration. We owe it to ourselves to step away from it regularly. Otherwise, we can be very much influenced by it in a way that we don't want to be.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with that is that obviously with a pub, you're with that group of people and that's it. No one else gets involved. But on social media, you get people you don't even know, or people like you've met once, or people you've never met in the flesh, or friends of friends who just kind of all pitch in to drown you out. And
that's a very valid point. I mean, another thing I've been advising people is to kind of I'm mixing two metaphors, is the Etch-a-Sketch and a Teflon frying pan. Is let things slide off and reset, because otherwise you carry that in your physiology. I mean, there's a lot of people said to me about this Bell's palsy. Maybe stress related. One friend who's a healer said to me it could be to do with injustice, because you've been like an injustice warrior since ever since I can remember. So maybe if we don't dissipate, we don't disconnect, we will manifest it physically, however that might show up in particular people. So going back to what you said about Susan Michie.
Yeah,
I really think it's really important we name these people. I know you're naming them in the article, but also name them so when people watch this, when you read the article, Shulagh's made it really easy to click and go and find out more about these people and the organisations they're involved in, because then that really has value. I think we be able to go find these people, see what they're saying, and you can start building up.
I mean, this whole thing literally started because one day, like, this whole article came from one tweet. I was looking at Susan Michie's Twitter feed, and she'd retweeted another of her UCL colleagues, a lady called Professor, I think Dr. Joanna Hale, and she was tweeting about this database that they've put together, and it's a database of behaviour change theories. There's over 70 of them. And so I went and looked at this database and all these different methods of behaviour change, and there was one in particular that caught my eye, which was called terror management theory. So I decided to go on a little expedition and look up what this actually was, and that was how this whole thing started. I thought that sounds a bit interesting. Terror management.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I've actually got that, but this idea of a terror management theory is there are many theories on, and there are many papers and written. I think a lot of these things are written in all sorts of places, universities, different kind of think tanks, and then they're picked out and used as required by the agendas that are underway. So okay, so that's that bit, and then yeah, I love this subheading. You're not scared enough for SAGE. So SAGE is the scientific advisor group in emergencies, aren't they? Have I messed that up?
Yeah. So obviously they've been having these meetings advising the government on the level of threat and what they should be doing about it. And as I mentioned earlier, the SPI-B document kind of hit the headlines, at least in the alternative media, because of that element of coercion that they were quite prepared to use. And
what are they doing in terms of coercion? I mean, what would you cite as some obvious examples of it?
Well, a lot of it boils down to the social pressure, the idea that, you know, if you don't wear the mask, if you don't do this, if you don't follow our guidelines, then you're a bad person, you're selfish. And the social pressure was a big one.
You also cited the BBC, I think it was EastEnders, that's an example of was it one of the characters goes into the corner shop to buy something, and she's kind of like questioning the narrative, and she's just belittled and literally kind of embarrassed into acquiescence, wasn't she?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that was kind of wrong with that in terms of the way this lady was stereotypically portrayed, because she wasn't going to have the vaccine, and she was portrayed as kind of unintelligent and making poor health choices, in that she was in the shop to buy cigarettes and all that kind of stuff.
Very belittling and arrogant, isn't it? It's like there's that arrogance and that kind of there's, you know what just came to mind is there's a film called My Dinner with Andre. There's two characters are sitting in a restaurant. It's basically the whole film from 1981. If you don't know the film, look it up. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I'll put the link to it, to the scene I mean. And the main protagonist, if you like, he says that maybe we're the prisoners and the guards. You know, it's like, and we will start to police. You know, I know there's been some work done to get children to out their parents if they're talking about all sorts of things, but it's like because they can't police it all, they can't control it all physically. So what's being done is getting manipulating or orchestrating a cultural level where people are starting to shame each other, identify each other as people who are kind of not following the narrative, and the broader public is bringing people into line. There was also an interview with the hotel owner. You know, the hotel owner, the Nightingale Hotel on Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
What was his name? I forgot his first name. Anyway, he was saying that he was on a flight and he told the officials that he wasn't wearing a mask and exempt and was accepted. Yet the passenger on the plane was asking to see the exception and the proof. Like they were now like authorizing themselves to hold other people accountable and restrict their freedoms, which is a staggering thing, really. Think about it.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And the police setting up these hotlines for people to snitch on each other, and again, I think we can't underestimate the role that the TV and radio presenters, I mean, the classic examples are your James O'Brien and Piers Morgan, people like that. You know, the way they're belittled not just members of the public, but eminent scientific experts as well.
They're an affront to anyone with a brain. I mean, they are. But the problem is how many people are on their side, because clearly they're getting viewing numbers, they're getting, they're building their audience, whether it's bought or it's loyal audience. But there are people going, yeah, we should lock down harder and heavier, and you should get your vaccine. You know, there are so many people that are saying that.
And you remember, like last year, there were a lot of people who were saying, oh, well, if you don't wear the mask, if you don't do this and that, then you don't deserve treatment from the NHS. I hope you get COVID and die, and all that kind of, like, where did that even come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a very inhumane, especially in England. I mean, I think in England we're quite charitable, we're quite compassionate to our fellow human, and to hear people, and people within the NHS have said things like that as well.
Yeah.
Like, you forego your rights because you're not one of us anymore, or you're dirty, or you're an outcast, or you're infected. It's like there's this kind of ejecting them from the clan. You're an outcast.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a story of someone who went into a hospital with an open leg wound, and because she didn't have a mask on, because she wouldn't wear a mask, they wouldn't treat her. Like, how is that suddenly okay when it would never have been before?
Mind boggles. I'm just going to move on a bit.
Sure.
There's a little you started talking about leveraging our fear of death, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah, so going back to the terror management theory, I decided to read about that, and at the bottom of this page on the UCL database where it was referenced, they reference some writing by the original creators of terror management theory. And so I went and read that, and it talked about all sorts of interesting stuff. And it also mentioned a psychoanalyst called Karen Horney, and she did a lot of work on self-esteem and that kind of thing. So basically what terror management theory says is that if death is brought into your conscience, into like your consciousness, the forefront of your mind, then you're going to react in a certain way. You're going to double down on your worldviews, and you're going to do anything you can to make yourself feel better. So you're going to try and bolster your self-esteem. And so obviously we can see what that death anxiety has done to people over the last year. And, going back to these social media threats, we can see that there's clear evidence that that was happening, in that people did want to feel better by winning arguments and doubling down on their worldviews and kind of attacking people. And Karen Horney, I mean, she had a whole list of different kind of personality types and the way that people would kind of handle their neuroses, but she separated them into three broad types, in that there were those who would kind of conform and seek approval. There were those who would be more detached and try and go for like a more self-sufficient approach. And then there will be those who would be aggressive and kind of try and restore their dominance and superiority. And again, I think there's a clear correlation between the way people have reacted in the real world to this threat. And yeah, I found that really, really interesting. How
just go back to those three categories. Actually, I wanted to say something about this idea of death as well. I remember we're both kind of quite, I don't know the word fan, but let's use it for want of a better term. But Michael Sarion, we both appreciate his work and his commentary. And I remember early on him saying that this is going to be a real struggle, this lockdown, because people haven't done the personal work. They haven't done the personal work and the depth of work to be able to be on their own, to be locked down. And one of the things I know Michael Sarion has advocated is this idea of the recluse, the person who takes themselves away from society, that you go into some kind of solitude and you venture within, i.e. making peace with who you are, peace with yourself, peace with your life. It's something that we don't do. We're too busy on devices, on work. I think something you cite within your article as well. We're working, we're tired, we're stressed, especially in a family environment. Mum and dad is working, kids are going to school. Everyone's occupied all the time. And this idea of actually having to be on your own and mitigate who you are for yourself. And I know for myself, my journey getting to where I am today meant I spent a lot of time on my own. And be honest with you, I found it a godsend to be able to just be on my own and have time real time to think and contemplate and make peace with your life. And I think I mentioned it in another podcast, but when I was stuck in Bulgaria back in January, Ian Crane, who I consider a friend, but also a mentor, a speaker, and the organizer of the Alternative View events, who's now since 25th of February passed away, called me in January, and we had this about an hour-long conversation. And someone asked me the other day on another podcast, sorry, Shulagh, but said, what two things have you, what have you really been a revelation or really kind of stand out of what you've learned over the last year? And I think in that conversation with Ian, it was about being fully committed to what you're committed to, but also as unattached as you can be. And I think unattachment, whether that's status, money, objects, worldview, whatever it is, or however you think things should be, or an attachment to whatever it is, the more we're unattached to an outcome, the more we're unattached to materialism, but ultimately I'd say unattached even to your own life. What I noticed for me,
it's a big thing. It's a really big thing.
Massive release in terms of fear.
Yeah.
Once you can be unattached about your life, I don't mean reckless about it, or you walk across the road without looking, or you eat raw chicken. No, what I'm saying is that actually you don't even own your life. You don't own anything. Now, once you kind of get, that's not something you say and then go, oh, I get it. It's not cognitive. It's a way of being where you can just, whatever comes, you're unattached. Going back to that Teflon, and Etch-a-Sketch, reset. It's like going back to zero. And I think one of the things that I see, especially in the compliant, and it applies to all of them, but the compliant is very much attached to some loss. Because fear of what? Your job, your reputation, embarrassment, whatever it is you're afraid of, ultimately, it is the fear of death.
Everything comes to an end at some point. And going back to the whole idea of self-esteem, a lot of people derive their self-esteem from, their jobs and their relationships. And all this kind of thing. So obviously, if that's taken away, people are in real trouble because they haven't got an internal source of self-esteem. And if you come to an acceptance of death on your own, then you're much more immune to these coercive measures and having that fear of death prodded at every opportunity, as they have been doing.
And I think that level of personal work is so valuable, because it does. And also, if you are in that compliant, fear-driven, social etiquette. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, that's not the done thing. You don't say that kind of thing in public." I'm like, I say what I choose to say, anywhere I choose to say it. I don't mean to be like, whether it's rude or belittling. I don't mean like that, but it's like, and sometimes you post stuff on certain Facebook. Oh, we don't allow political posts. Now, I get that, because if you're talking about fishing, what the hell are you doing about talking about political stuff? Because it's a different subject. I get that. But the idea is that we don't talk about those things, whether it's money. There's a shame. There's like an embarrassment to even discuss some of these things. And obviously, I can speak for myself. I've been posting quite controversial information for as long as I can remember, or at least talking about it pre-internet. So you build a muscle. You don't feel embarrassed to share this stuff, because what else would you talk about? If you're not going to talk about this stuff, what are you going to talk about? Everything else seems quite superficial. When you talk about when you talk about ultimately losing your freedom as a human being, what is there that's more important than that?
Yeah.
Someone say health, but what's your health without freedom? You could be the healthiest bird in the cage. Is it? You could be the richest person in the cage, but ultimately, what's more important? I know for you, freedom is one of your most important values. Hence, why we do what we do. So, if people can reconcile their life, then there's nothing to fear.
Exactly. As I say, you do become immune to a lot of this pressure, which unfortunately is really taking its toll on the rest of the population and those who are genuinely worried about a virus or whatever else is being thrown at us.
I think a lot of those are highly anaesthetized. at the moment still. I mean, if you're furloughed and you've got time at home and you're eating chocolate, watching porn and chilling out, it's still not, the reality of the situation has still not come to the fore, has it?
Yeah, you've not technically lost an awful lot.
No.
You can still kind of do pretty much what you were doing beforehand, and if anything, you might have a little bit more time to enjoy it.
Yeah, I remember the first lockdowns in March, April, May last year. It was lovely. It was like a holiday. You know, the weather was good. We had free time. The skies looked blue all of a sudden because there didn't seem to be as many planes flying and all the things that they spray. You know, it was actually quite. It was quite it wasn't unpleasant. But we knew we'd wake up and there'd be more, the 5G masts showing up. And then we, do different kind of masks showing up in different places. So the plans or the agendas were still rolling on while we were sitting at home, just kind of a bit scared, but kind of okay. We were all okay.
Yeah.
So this death, and the other thing about the death thing, which is interesting, is the way that the death numbers have been aggregated. They're rolling the numbers on top of the numbers.
Yeah, they're there the whole time, flashing up. And this is another thing, going back to Susan Michie, her and her husband, who's also on the SPI-B committee, Professor Robert West, they released a paper in Nature Journal back in the early days of lockdown. And again, they were looking at all sorts of measures to mitigate the pandemic and how they could use behaviour change methods to get people to do what they said they should do. And one of the strategies they came up with was one of the problems they had was, how do we stop people touching their T-zone? Obviously the T-zone bit being part of your face. And they came up with an acronym, DEADS, DEADS, which I thought if you didn't need any more confirmation that this was a sinister agenda and that they wanted you to have death in your mind the absolute whole time, then surely this kind of proves it. Obviously that didn't make it into the public arena. We had hands, face, space and other things instead, and it was a shitty acronym because I can't even remember now what it stands for. But imagine if people were walking around saying dead to themselves all day long to remind themselves not to touch their T-zone.
It's quite horrendous. We break it down that these are intentional strategies that people are getting paid, vast amounts of money to come up with
obscene amounts of money.
Yeah, I mean they're bought. I mean they're selling their souls and selling out humanity at wholesale. It's just and also even if you look at the Neil Ferguson and all those kind of Imperial College and the Sage players and the these boards and these kind of unelected influencers. They are a lot. The name comes up over and over again. Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation money has oiled a lot of the wheels in these organisations. And if you're putting money, you want your return. That you want your payday. That is now right. You've been given all this. You're given this money. You're given these opportunities. You're given this status or profile. Now it's time to, same with the celebrities and the actors. I mean, the amount of celebrities and actors that have come out and just, it's enough to make you vomit. It's enough to make you vomit. It's like, you realise that the level of deceit and treachery that is going on is an industrial scale, because obviously it's a global agenda. It's not like they're not paying for marbles, they're paying for the planet.
Yeah, it's like the government were paying, I think it's like over £10,000 per post for these social media influencers, and these are people who aren't even proper celebrities either. They're just people who happen, like these Love Island kind of
and they have an audience of a million
characters.
But I listened to Richie Allen. Was it last night? He was speaking to Gerald Celente. And all these people criticising Israel, for example, and very rightly so. They said, "Why are we criticising Israel? We should be criticising our own governments that support them." It's like we are complicit there is a complicit nature to this as well. Is those celebrities get a load of money to put a tweet or do an advert or whatever it is they're doing it for, but the audience, it's
the audience lap it up. That's the problem.
I saw an article with is it Nicki Minaj wore some pink Crocs with blinged up pink.
Oh, I saw them.
Crocs, and like the sales of Crocs have gone up like 3,000%.
There's a reason I went off pink.
But it just makes you aware that there is an audience that's been harvested. The audience is there, and there are vast swathes of people, including I don't know what it is now. Is it 30 million people that have supposedly been vaccinated?
Yeah. Again, we've got no guarantee as to how accurate those figures are. But
Sure. But even so, I know loads of people who said, "Yeah, I've had my vaccine." Why? Oh, I want to go on holiday. Oh, do you now?
Good luck with that.
How's that working out for you? Like you think a vaccine is going to get you back to where we were. No, it's like putting your head further into the trap. You put your head further into the cutting board. No, great. Okay, cool, brilliant. Just scrolling down, the next thing on here is the terror. Oh, by the way, I think we're going to do this in 2 parts. We're not going to go through the whole document.
Yeah, there is a lot here. There's a lot to cover.
I'm encouraging Shulagh to do some more short form videos, just breaking down,
Yeah, I will, definitely.
Section as well, which I think would be a good idea. So going back to this terror management theory, you call it here is the terror management theory health model.
Yeah, there's 2. There's the terror management theory itself, and then from those basic principles, they came up with a terror management health model, which is all about how to use terror management theory to influence people's health behaviours. So, for example, if you want to get people to wash their hands more and not touch their T-zone, then, how do you do that? So,
yeah, okay.
So there were studies done looking at, obviously, the pandemic through the lens of terror management theory, and some of those are quite interesting. One of them started to talk about masks being very much more of an ideology rather than something that was actually helpful, and how seeing celebrities adopt masks and how masks becoming kind of like a fashion statement would help very much with like the ideological significance of wearing them.
Yeah, well, it's also it's like this virtue signaling. It's like, well, I'm doing as I'm told. I'm a good boy. I care about other people. I'm not spreading my germs. I'm protecting you by doing this. And there's a whole. There was a really interesting episode of the Crow 777. They did a whole thing around masks, symbology of masks, the way when we hide our faces, what we're actually doing, and how we're kind of disconnecting ourselves from others in our community. And then when you go into a store and there's just these eyes coming out the top, I just walk into a place and I say, you don't need to put that on, take that off. It's okay, no, take it. No, just put it down, you'll be fine. And then you go, oh, I hate wearing this bloody thing. I remember once going into Aldi, and this woman said to me, one of the workers, excuse me, sir, can you put your mask on? I said, I don't wear a mask, and I would advise that you don't wear. And she went, why? I said, because they're really bad for you, they don't help you. How's your breathing? She was lifting things and doing stuff. And she said, I really hate this mask. I said, good, and tell your boss you're not wearing it. And it was like it was flicked instantly. So I think the mask as a symbol is a very powerful way that we kind of say I'm complying or I'm not.
I mean, there was a definite line in the sand drawn, I think, in terms of people. We heard that phrase, take a side, and I think that was one of the defining moments when people did. The people who were going to wear the masks and the people who were adamant that they weren't.
Take a side, and in the world of divide and conquer, you want to. It doesn't matter what division, what the actual whether the mask is is a good thing or not. it's almost arbitrary. It's you've been told to wear it. You're either doing as you're told or you're not. You know, and I was on this conversation the other day with some people, and I said to them, look, you know, I break the law all the time, don't we? We all break the law. And I go, what do you mean you break the law? They said, well, how many of you go down the road at 30 miles an hour at 42 or 40 or 35? Yeah, but I said, no, you're still breaking the law. You're still breaking the rules, but you do it all the time. So why are you so, you know, unless you really believe that the mask is affording you some kind of protection or others, then why are you wearing it? Because if you really look at it, you'll find out that it's actually doing you harm. So the actual request or the requirement is doing you more damage than good, and yet you're following it because you've been told to. Why don't you question why you're doing that? You know, it's like, and they just go, so you don't need to wear the mask. Well, it's not a law. And it's like so out of their purview. It's like, well, yeah, but we've been told to. And that's all it is. You know, it's all it is. It's you've been told to. The other thing that you've got here as well, I wanted to, the way that NHS, I found really interesting, is the way that NHS has been, dare I say, weaponised? But it's like, yeah, or it's become a very a sacred cow.
Yeah. So again, going back to terror management theory, what they posit is that in order to buffer this death anxiety, we have cultural drama. So all sorts of aspects of our culture, which can include obviously things like politics, but for a lot of us, it's just normal stuff. You know, people who go to church, people who have hobbies, go to the gym, all that stuff. And as we know, in those days of lockdown, pretty much all of that was taken away. And so we had a gaping gap in our lives that needed to be filled. And suddenly we had this new culture, this new cultural drama that was kind of given to us on a plate in terms of, you know, the clap for carers every Thursday night, the rainbows, which again are a whole other story, where those symbols came from. And you know, this worship of the NHS and all sorts of other stuff, Captain Tom Moore and George Floyd killings, all this stuff that was going on, and suddenly, you know, replaced all the usual things that we had going on in our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was like a breakdown and destruction of current culture and habits and behaviour, and all these new things were brought in, but very quickly. So where the rainbows come from? Where did the, you know, going out Thursday night and hitting the pans and all that stuff? It's almost like a trained seal syndrome. You know, people are just doing what they've been trained to do. No context, no understanding of what they're doing, other than it's a good thing to do and you should do it too.
Yeah, it went on for months, didn't it? It started early days of lockdown. I think it didn't come to an end until about July.
It went on for a while. I remember, yeah. And I'm like, where I was living at the time was a very kind of normiesville estate that I was living on in the UK. And every they'd just do it. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm surrounded with it. Probably everyone felt the same. I don't know, but you know, it was where I was. It was like clearly it was a target demographic for these for the compliant, for sure.
Yeah, going back to those three groups of people.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I know. One thing I wanted to also comment on is these rituals. They're like the dance routines. I mean, that was very odd for me. I mean, is there anything?
Yeah, it's like that's still going on. I still see new ones cropping up. And there was one quite recently, I don't know if you saw it, but it was like professionally shot because it was filmed like with a drone and like really high production values.
No, it's awful. It's awful. I'll tell you what I did.
And it was clearly like they weren't nurses and doctors. They must have been professional performers. Just wearing
the uniforms. There was a video about PSYOP and ASL. Was it ASL? ALS? You know, the ice bucket challenge.
Oh yeah.
2014. I remember when that came about and people were doing it. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, again, it's another way of just getting people to do something. And you see it in all the music videos, you see it in adverts, you know, remember, what's up? You know, suddenly everyone's doing what's up, including me. But, you know, it's just, you think these things are just fun and a little bit, you know, whatever. And at a level, they are a bit of fun, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
but you assume they happen organically.
Yes, exactly.
And a lot of the time, they don't.
They're not organic. They are orchestrated. They're orchestrated, and there are, yeah, exactly. Okay, shall we do a little bit more, and then we'll kind of, because we've gone almost 50 minutes here. I think we'll finish on. Actually, should we stop there? Yeah, we'll stop there. So what's the plan for the article?
Well, I'm writing some stuff for, obviously, myself, my own website, Wielding the Sword, but some of my stuff is going to be put out on the website of a group called the Awareness Foundation. We've got a little team of writers, and they've recently gone live with their website, but it's a one-stop shop for a lot of different things. They've got a lot of interesting strategies going on, so I think we're going to be seeing more of them over the next few months.
Right.
I've got a lot of kind of high-level collaborations going on.
The links to all that will be below this video. So I don't even know if we'll do this in 2 parts. I think we might have to do 3 parts looking at it, because I think it's really worth the effort. I want to, again, I know I'm going to be a bit kind of acknowledging here, but I think what you've written is really, really good. I think it's really valuable. Anyone can read this and get value from it. You know, it's really to the point and factual without being excluding. You don't have to worry about it. If you're interested, you will get value from the article. And what I like is you put in a lot of references, so people can, for those who want to, can go off into detail.
There are tons of links. I mean, my goal was to kind of make it not too dry. There's a little bit of summary of research papers, that kind of thing, but I wanted to put it into a kind of story context, and that's another thing that we can talk about next time, the idea of how stories have been used to get these messages across into the public domain, and particularly into the media. That's really interesting. And it's well known that stories improve connection with your audience, but again, they can be used for good and bad. So
sorry, Shulagh. Okay, look, I think we'll leave it there for today. Really, really well written, fantastic. I know it's going to be edited a bit more, and it'll be out soon. Maybe it'll be out. We'll have the link at the bottom of this once it's ready to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening. We have had a lot more people watching our podcasts of late, which I think is because we've been doing some new and interesting guests. I've got more in the pipeline. Any comments or suggestions, please feed back to myself and Shulagh. Also, if you like what we're doing, like and subscribe to the channel, share this video, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye. Bye, Shulagh.
Bye. Thank you.